You've had your time, Mom. We deserve this now. Those words still echo in my chest like a death sentence. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd share. And if you, for even a second, feel like this sounds familiar, please just leave a like and subscribe. It'll help me keep finding the courage to speak these truths out loud. My name is Evelyn Parker. I'm 73 years old, and I live in a modest 2-bedroom house on Maple Street in Columbus, Ohio, the same house where my late husband Thomas and I raised our dreams and watched them slowly get devoured by the very people we created them for. This morning started like every other morning for the past 5 years. I woke up at 5:47 a.m., not by choice, but because my body has forgotten how to sleep past the worry. The first thing I did, like always, was reach for my phone on the nightstand, my arthritic fingers trembling slightly as I checked for messages. 3 missed calls from Rachel, 2 from her husband Brad, and 17 text messages that made my stomach clench before I even read them. Mom? The electric bill is due today. Can you transfer the money now? Brad's car payment is overdue. The kids need new winter coats. Mom, are you ignoring us? I sat there in my faded blue nightgown, the one with the small hole near the left shoulder that I kept meaning to fix, but never found the time because I was always too busy fixing everyone else's problems. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains Thomas had hung 15 years ago, casting shadows across the framed photographs on my dresser. Pictures of Rachel's wedding, where I'd paid for the flowers, the venue, and half the catering. Pictures of my grandchildren's birthday parties, where I'd provided the cake, the presents, and the smiles while everyone else provided the demands. I shuffled to the kitchen, my house slippers making soft scratching sounds against the worn linoleum floor. The coffee maker gurgled to life, and I stood there watching it drip, remembering when Thomas used to make me coffee every morning before he went to work at the steel plant. He'd kiss my forehead and say, "Another day, another dollar, Evie." But we're building something beautiful. We had built something beautiful. A savings account that grew slowly, steadily, through 42 years of marriage. Thomas working double shifts, me clipping coupons and mending clothes instead of buying new ones. We'd saved $3.6 million, not through luck or inheritance, but through sacrifice and dreams of a secure future. Dreams of maybe traveling to Ireland, where Thomas's grandmother was born. Dreams of a comfortable retirement where we could finally breathe. Thomas never got to see Ireland. Heart attack at 68, right there in our backyard while he was fixing the fence Rachel's kids had broken during last summer's barbecue. The coffee was bitter that morning, but I drank it anyway. Everything had become bitter lately. My phone buzzed again. Rachel. Mom, we need to talk. It's important. I knew what important meant. It meant money. It always meant money. I looked around my kitchen. The same yellow cabinets from 1987, the refrigerator that made strange noises but still kept food cold, the small dining table where Thomas and I used to play cards every Sunday evening. This house held 40 years of memories. But lately, it felt more like a prison where I sat waiting for the next demand, the next crisis, the next time someone would need me to open my wallet and close my mouth. I thought about the spreadsheet hidden in my desk drawer upstairs. The one I'd been keeping for 3 years now, tracking every dollar I'd given to Rachel and Brad. The mortgage payments when Brad lost his job, the car repairs when Rachel decided she needed a newer SUV, the vacation to Disney World that was for the kids, but somehow required first-class flights and a 5-star resort. The total at the bottom of that spreadsheet made me nauseous every time I looked at it. $127,000 in 3 years. $127,000 that could have paid for the roof repairs I kept postponing, the physical therapy my doctor recommended for my back, or the hearing aids I needed but couldn't justify buying when Rachel's family needed a new hot tub. I dressed slowly, choosing my best blouse, the navy blue one with the pearl buttons that Rachel had complimented once, 3 years ago. I wanted to look presentable, dignified, like the mother she used to respect instead of the ATM she'd grown accustomed to using. The drive to Rachel's house took 23 minutes through neighborhoods where the houses grew larger and the lawns greener the farther I got from my own street. Rachel lived in Worthington Hills, where the mailboxes were made of stone and the driveways could fit 4 cars. Her house was a sprawling colonial with white columns and black shutters, sitting on 2 acres of professionally landscaped lawn. I parked my 20-year-old Subaru, Thomas's car, with the broken heater and the passenger door that stuck, next to Brad's Tesla and Rachel's BMW. Both cars were newer than anything I'd ever owned. Both paid for with money I'd transferred without question because family helps family. Rachel opened the door before I could knock. She was 45 now, but she looked younger, thanks to the personal trainer and the skincare routine and the salon appointments that somehow always ended up on my credit card. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled. Her yoga clothes probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and her smile, that practice smile that never quite reached her eyes anymore, was already in place. "Mom, come in, come in." Brad's in the kitchen looking at some exciting opportunities. The house smelled like expensive candles and fresh flowers. Flowers that I'd paid for, delivered weekly by a service that cost more than my monthly medication budget. Everything was perfect, polished, pristine, like a magazine cover. Like a life that I'd funded but was never quite invited to live. Brad looked up from his laptop as we entered the kitchen. His smile was broader than Rachel's, more confident. He'd been confident ever since he'd figured out that marrying Rachel meant marrying into a family with a very generous grandmother figure who never said no. "Evelyn, perfect timing. We just got some incredible news about property values in this area." He turned the laptop screen toward me, showing real estate listings with numbers that made my head spin. Houses selling for millions. Investment opportunities. Market projections. "The thing is," Rachel said, settling into her chair with that casual tone she used when she was about to ask for something massive, "we've been thinking about our future, about the kids' future, about what makes sense financially." I nodded, my hands folded in my lap, waiting for the request. College tuition for the kids? A bigger house? Another car? But then Rachel said something that stopped my heart. "We talked to a financial advisor, Mom, about your estate." The words hung in the air like smoke, toxic and suffocating. "Your estate is worth $3.6 million, Brad continued, his voice taking on the tone he used when discussing business deals. "And we've been thinking, you're 73 now. You've had your time to enjoy life, to travel, to do whatever you wanted. But now it's our turn. We deserve this money now, while we can actually use it to build something meaningful." I stared at them. These 2 people I'd loved and supported and sacrificed for, and felt something crack inside my chest. Not my heart. That would have been too clean, too quick. This was messier, deeper, like the sound of old wood splintering under too much weight. Deserve. They deserved my life's work. They deserved the money Thomas and I had saved through decades of sacrifice. They deserved the security we'd built by saying no to ourselves so we could say yes to the future. And I? According to my own daughter, I'd already had my time. At 73, apparently, I was done. Finished. Ready to be discarded like an empty bank account. I sat there in Rachel's perfect kitchen, surrounded by the luxury I'd helped pay for, and realized that I'd spent so many years trying to buy their love that I'd forgotten to ask if they'd ever loved me at all. The word deserve echoed in my mind as I drove home from Rachel's house. My hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had turned white. But it wasn't anger that made me shake. It was the sudden, crushing weight of memory. Every sacrifice, every dollar, every time I'd said, "Of course, honey," when I should have said no. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for 20 minutes, staring at my house through the windshield. The paint was peeling near the front door. The gutters needed cleaning. The porch steps had a loose board that creaked every time I walked on it. All things I could have fixed with the money I'd been pouring into Rachel's perfect life. Inside, I went straight to my bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of my dresser. Under my winter sweaters, wrapped in tissue paper, was a shoebox I hadn't opened in months. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Receipts, bank statements, canceled checks. All the evidence of a mother's love measured in dollars and cents. The first receipt was from 2019. Rachel had just had her second baby, and Brad's hours at the marketing firm had been cut. "Just until we get back on our feet, Mom," Rachel had said, bouncing little Emma on her hip while 4-year-old Jake tugged at her yoga pants. The daycare is so expensive and we're already behind on the mortgage. I'd written a check for $3,200 that same day. Mortgage payment, late fees, and a little extra for groceries. I remember feeling so proud, so useful, so needed. The second receipt was from Christmas 2019. I'd bought presents for everyone. Expensive toys for the kids, a new watch for Brad, a designer handbag for Rachel. But more than that, I'd paid for their entire Christmas dinner. The prime rib, the wine, the decorations, even the gas for Brad's grill. Another $800 gone, but seeing the kids' faces light up had felt worth every penny. Then came 2020. The pandemic hit, and Brad lost his job entirely. "It's temporary, Mom," Rachel had assured me over FaceTime, her voice strained but still demanding. "Just until the economy gets better. We'll pay you back." I'd covered their mortgage for 8 months. $2,400 each month, plus utilities, plus groceries, plus the car payments on both their vehicles. I'd dipped into the savings account Thomas and I had built together, the one we'd planned to use for our retirement travels. The balance dropped from $3.8 million to $3.2 million in less than a year. "It's an investment in our family's future," I'd told myself, sitting at this same kitchen table, writing check after check. This is what grandmothers do. But the receipts told a different story. They showed a pattern I'd been too blind to see while I was living it. Brad got a new job in 2021, a better job, with better pay. But the requests didn't stop. They evolved. "Mom, the kids need to go to private school. The public schools here just aren't good enough. Mom, we found this amazing house. It's perfect for the kids, but we need help with the down payment. Mom, Brad's car broke down. He needs something reliable for work." Each request came with a story, a justification, a reason why this was actually for my benefit too. "Think of your grandchildren's future, Mom. We're building generational wealth. You want us to be successful, don't you?" I found the receipt from Jake's birthday party last year. $2,400 for a bounce house, a magician, and catering for 30 kids. I'd written the check without hesitation because Rachel had said, "Mom, you know how important it is for Jake to feel special. All his friends have these elaborate parties." I'd driven to that party in my old Subaru, wearing a dress I'd bought at Walmart, carrying a $300 gift card because Rachel had texted me a link to Jake's wish list on Amazon. I'd watched my grandson tear through presents worth more than my monthly Social Security check. And when he'd hugged me and said, "Thanks, Grandma," I'd felt like the richest woman in the world. But I'd also noticed something else that day, the way Rachel had introduced me to the other parents. "This is my mom," she'd said, not with pride, but with a sort of casual dismissal, like I was a piece of furniture that happened to be useful. I'd stood there in my discount dress, surrounded by women wearing designer clothes and discussing their Pilates classes and their European vacations, and I'd felt invisible, not like a beloved grandmother, but like a wallet with legs. The receipts continued, an endless parade of financial bleeding disguised as family love, Emma's dance classes, Jake's baseball equipment, Rachel's girls' weekend in Napa Valley, Brad's golf club membership, the new furniture for their living room, the family vacation to Maui where I'd paid for everything but stayed home because someone needs to watch the house. I found the receipt from last month that had finally made me start this hidden accounting. Rachel had called crying, saying Emma needed emergency dental work. "It's $4,000, Mom, and our insurance won't cover it. Please, she's in so much pain." I'd transferred the money immediately, my heart breaking for my granddaughter. But 3 days later, I'd seen Rachel's Instagram post, photos of her and Brad at an expensive steakhouse, celebrating their anniversary. The same night Emma was supposedly suffering. I'd called to check on Emma, and Jake had answered the phone. "Grandma, guess what? Mom and Dad took us to Dave & Buster's after Emma's dentist appointment. She got a new toy and wasn't even sad." The dental work had cost $800. The rest of my $4,000 had funded their celebration. That's when I'd started keeping the receipts. Not out of anger, but out of a desperate need to understand how I'd become a person who could be lied to so casually, so completely. I pulled out a small notebook I'd hidden under the receipts. In my careful handwriting, I'd documented everything. 2019, $15,400, mortgage help, Christmas, emergency car repair. 2020, $34,800. Pandemic support, mortgage, utilities, groceries. 2021, $28,200. Private school tuition, house down payment, Brad's car. 2022, $31,000 $400. Vacation, home improvements, medical expenses. 2023, $41,200. Wedding gift for Brad's sister, new furniture, Jake's party. The total was $151,000. Not the $127,000 I'd estimated earlier. I'd been too generous with myself, too willing to forget the smaller requests that had added up to devastating amounts. $151,000. More than Thomas had made in the last 3 years of his life combined. I closed the notebook and looked at the last item in the shoebox. A photograph from my wedding day, 45 years ago. Thomas in his rented tuxedo, me in my mother's altered wedding dress. Both of us grinning like we'd won the lottery. We'd been so young, so hopeful, so certain that hard work and love would be enough to build a beautiful life. We had built a beautiful life. We'd just given it away to people who thought they deserved it more than we did. I thought about the conversation I'd had with Thomas the night before he died. We'd been lying in bed, and he'd taken my hand in his rough, calloused palm. "Evie," he'd said, his voice soft in the darkness. "I worry about you when I'm gone. Rachel and Brad, they take advantage of your good heart. Promise me you'll take care of yourself first." "Don't talk like that," I'd whispered, squeezing his hand. "We're going to grow old together, remember? We're going to see Ireland. Promise me," he'd insisted. And I'd promised, never thinking I'd need to keep that promise so soon. Now, sitting in our bedroom with the evidence of my financial devastation spread across the comforter, I wondered if Thomas was watching me from somewhere. Disappointed that I'd broken my promise so completely, my phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Mom, I hope you're not upset about our conversation today. We just want what's best for everyone. Can you transfer $800 for Emma's gymnastics? The payment is due tomorrow." I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the keyboard. 6 months ago, I would have transferred the money immediately. 3 months ago, I would have hesitated but done it anyway. Today, for the first time in years, I turned off my phone without responding. I gathered up all the receipts, all the evidence of my systematic destruction, and put them back in the shoebox. But I left the photograph out. Thomas and me on our wedding day, young and foolish and in love, believing that the future would be kind to people who worked hard and treated others with generosity. I placed the photograph on my nightstand, next to the small pewter box where I kept Thomas's wedding ring. Inside that box, I'd also hidden something else. A business card for Margaret Harrison, the estate planning attorney who'd helped me update my will after Thomas died. "When you're ready to make some changes, Mrs. Parker," she'd said, "call me. Sometimes the people we love most need to learn the hardest lessons." I picked up the business card and ran my thumb over the embossed lettering. Was I used? The question had been haunting me for months, but now I knew the answer. Yes, I was used. Systematically, methodically, lovingly used by people who'd learned that I would always say yes, always provide, always sacrifice myself for their comfort. The question now was, what was I going to do about it? The silence in my house felt different that night. Not peaceful, suffocating. Like the air itself was thick with unspoken truths I'd been too afraid to acknowledge. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at Margaret Harrison's business card, when my mind began replaying moments I'd buried, deep, small cruelties I'd dismissed as misunderstandings. My 72nd birthday, 8 months ago. I'd woken up excited, like a child on Christmas morning. Thomas had always made my birthdays special. Flowers, breakfast in bed, a small gift wrapped in newspaper comics because we couldn't afford fancy paper, but he made it feel precious anyway. I'd waited all day for a call, a text, a card, anything. At 3 p.m., I'd finally called Rachel myself. "Oh, Mom, happy birthday. I'm so sorry. We've been swamped. Jake had practice, Emma had her recital, and Brad's been working late on this huge project." "That's okay, honey," I'd said, trying to keep the disappointment from my voice. "Maybe we could do something this weekend." This weekend is crazy too. Rain check? The rain check never came. 2 weeks later, Rachel had posted photos on Facebook from Jake's friend's birthday party. Elaborate celebration with a hired DJ and a chocolate fountain. The caption read, "Some kids deserve the world." I'd stared at that post for an hour, wondering why an 8-year-old stranger deserved a celebration, but I didn't. Then there was the time I'd fallen in my driveway last winter. Black ice, a twisted ankle, and no way to get up. I'd managed to crawl to my phone and call Rachel, my voice shaking from cold and pain. "Mom, I'm at Emma's dance class. Can you call an Uber or something? I really can't leave right now." An Uber. To take me to the emergency room. Because her daughter's dance class was more important than her mother's potential broken bones. Mrs. Henderson from next door had found me 20 minutes later, helped me inside, and driven me to the hospital herself. A stranger showed more concern for my well-being than my own child. But even that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how I'd made excuses for her. "Rachel's so busy with the kids," I'd told Mrs. Henderson. "She has so much on her plate." The microaggressions weren't just about emergencies. They were woven into every interaction, so subtle I'd almost convinced myself I was imagining them. Like how Rachel never invited me to family gatherings anymore. I had to ask if I could come. "Oh, sure, Mom. If you want to. It's just going to be casual." Casual meant I wasn't worth dressing up for. Casual meant I was an afterthought. Or how she'd show me photos of the kids at school events, birthday parties, graduations, events where I was never mentioned, never included, never even considered. "Look how proud Jake was at his science fair," she'd say, showing me pictures of my grandson with awards I'd never been told about. "I didn't know he was in the science fair," I'd said once. "Oh, it was just a small thing. You know how busy you are." Busy. I was 72 years old, retired, and living alone. What could I possibly be busy with that was more important than my grandson's achievements? The truth was, I wasn't busy. I was just inconvenient. A burden they had to manage, not a person they wanted to include. Last Christmas had been the breaking point I'd been too naive to recognize. I'd spent $400 on presents for everyone, carefully choosing gifts I thought they'd love. For Rachel, a cashmere scarf I'd seen her admire in a store window. For Brad, a book about investment strategies he'd mentioned wanting. For the kids, toys from their elaborate Amazon wish lists. I'd wrapped everything beautifully, written heartfelt notes, and arrived at their house on Christmas morning with my arms full of gifts and my heart full of hope. But when I'd walked in, I'd noticed something that made my stomach drop. Under their massive Christmas tree, there were piles of presents, mountains of them. Designer clothes, expensive electronics, toys that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, but I didn't see a single gift with my name on it. "Mom, you're here!" Rachel had hugged me quickly, then immediately started organizing the kids for present opening. "We're so excited to see what you brought." I'd sat on their leather sofa, the one I'd helped pay for, and watched my family tear through gifts like hungry wolves. They'd thanked me politely, distracted, already moving on to the next box before fully appreciating what they'd just received. And when all the presents were opened, when the living room looked like a wrapping paper bomb had exploded, Rachel had started cleaning up. That's when I realized there really was nothing for me. "Oh, Mom," Rachel had said, noticing me sitting there empty-handed. "We were so busy this year. We'll get you something later, okay?" Later never came. It had been 8 months, but that wasn't even the moment that broke me. That came 3 weeks ago, when I'd discovered the truth about Emma's emergency dental work. I'd been at the grocery store, struggling to decide between name brand and generic cereal, a decision that had become necessary since my monthly giving had exceeded my monthly income. That's when I'd overheard 2 women talking in the next aisle. "Did you see Rachel Parker's Instagram? That girl lives such a charmed life." "I know. That kitchen renovation looks amazing. Must have cost a fortune." Kitchen renovation. I'd frozen between the Cheerios and the store brand equivalent, my blood turning to ice. Rachel had texted me that very morning. "Mom, Emma's teeth are getting worse. The dentist says she needs more work. Can you help with another $3,000? I'd transferred the money immediately, my heart breaking for my granddaughter's pain. But according to these strangers, Rachel was renovating her kitchen. I'd abandoned my cart and driven straight to Rachel's house, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. When I'd pulled into her driveway, I'd seen the construction trucks, the workers carrying in new cabinets, the dumpster full of perfectly good kitchen fixtures. Rachel had come out to meet me, her face flushed with what I'd mistaken for embarrassment. "Mom, what a surprise. We were going to tell you about the renovation, but we didn't want you to worry about the cost." "Emma's dental work," I'd said, my voice barely a whisper. "What about it?" "You said she needed more work, emergency work." Rachel had looked at me like I was confused, like I was the one who'd gotten the story wrong. "Oh, that. Yeah, that's taken care of. This is different. This is about improving our home value. An investment, really. An investment. With my money I'd given her believing my granddaughter was in pain." "Rachel," I'd said, my voice shaking, "was Emma ever in pain?" She'd paused just long enough for me to know the answer. "Mom, you worry too much. Kids are resilient. And look how beautiful this is going to be." That night, I'd sat in my kitchen and cried until no more tears would come. Not because of the money, though $3,000 was more than I'd spent on myself in 6 months, but because of the casual cruelty of it. The way she'd used my love for Emma to fund her kitchen renovation. The way she'd looked me in the eye and lied, knowing I'd never question her, never doubt her, never say no. I'd opened my laptop and Googled something I'd never thought I'd need to research. Financial elder abuse signs. The list had made me sick. Family members who show excessive interest in the elder's financial accounts. Unexplained withdrawals from accounts. Elders' basic needs unmet despite adequate financial resources. Isolation from friends and family. Elder appears fearful or anxious around certain family members. Every checkmark had felt like a nail in a coffin I'd been building for myself. But the article had also mentioned something else. Victims often rationalize the abuse, making excuses for their abusers because they fear losing the relationship entirely. I'd stared at that sentence for an hour. Seeing myself so clearly, it hurt. How many times had I made excuses for Rachel's behavior? How many times had I told myself that asking for respect was asking for too much? Now, sitting in my kitchen with Margaret Harrison's business card in my hand, I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. I wasn't losing a relationship. I'd never had one to lose. What I'd had was a transaction, my money for their presence, my sacrifice for their tolerance, my silence for their comfort. And tomorrow, I was going to break that transaction. I picked up my phone and for the first time in months, turned it back on. 17 missed calls from Rachel, 43 text messages, each one more demanding than the last. "Mom, where are you? Why aren't you answering? This is ridiculous. You're acting like a child. Fine. Be dramatic. But Emma still needs her gymnastics money. Mom, I'm worried about you. Call me back. If you don't answer, I'm calling the police for a wellness check." The police. She was threatening to have the police check on me because I hadn't immediately sent money for gymnastics lessons. I scrolled through the messages, watching my daughter's tone shift from demanding to manipulative to threatening. This was the woman I'd raised, loved, and sacrificed everything for. This was the woman who thought I'd had my time. I deleted every message without reading the rest. Then I did something I'd never done before. I blocked her number. The silence that followed was profound. Not empty, peaceful. Like the moment after a storm when you realize the house is still standing. I looked at Margaret Harrison's business card one more time, then reached for my phone to make the call that would change everything. But first, I walked to my dresser and pulled out the small pewter box where I kept Thomas's wedding ring. Inside, underneath the ring, was something I'd forgotten I'd hidden there. A small brass key, the key to our safety deposit box, the box where Thomas and I had stored our most important documents, including our original wills and something else, a letter Thomas had written to me before he died, sealed in an envelope with instructions not to open it unless I ever felt truly alone. Tonight, for the first time since his death, I felt ready to read his final words. As I held the key in my palm, I whispered to the empty house, "Thomas, I think it's time to keep the promise I made to you." The brass key felt warm in my hand, like hope. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of someone pounding on my front door. Not knocking. pounding, the kind of desperate hammering that makes your heart race and your hands shake before you're even fully conscious. I looked at the clock. 6:47 a.m. Through the peephole, I could see Brad's face, red and angry, his fist raised to pound again. Behind him stood Rachel, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of fury and something else. Panic. I didn't open the door. "Mom!" Rachel's voice was shrill, carrying through the wood. "We know you're in there. Your car's in the driveway." Pound, pound, pound. "Evelyn!" Brad's voice now deeper, more demanding. "This is ridiculous! Open the door!" I stepped back from the peephole and sat down on my living room sofa, my hands folded in my lap. For the first time in years, I felt calm. Not happy, not vindictive, just calm. Like I'd been holding my breath for decades and could finally exhale. The pounding continued for another 5 minutes, then stopped. I heard their voices through the door, but they were talking to each other now, not to me. "This is insane," Brad was saying. "She's never acted like this before." "Something's wrong with her," Rachel replied. "Maybe she's having some kind of breakdown. Old people do that sometimes." Old people. At 73, I'd become old people to my own daughter. Not mom when she was worried about me. Just old people who have breakdowns and need to be managed. My phone started ringing. I'd unblocked them temporarily, curious to see how they'd handle being ignored. Rachel's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. This time I answered, but didn't speak. "Mom? Mom, are you there? I can hear you breathing." I remained silent. "Look, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this is childish. We're your family. You can't just ignore us because you're having some kind of senior moment." Senior moment. My decision to finally stand up for myself was being dismissed as cognitive decline. "Emma has gymnastics today," Rachel continued, her voice taking on that familiar wheedling tone she used when she wanted something. "You know how important it is to her. She's been looking forward to it all week." Still, I said nothing. "Fine," Rachel snapped, her patience evaporating. "Be selfish. But don't blame us when Emma asks why Grandma doesn't love her anymore." She hung up, using Emma against me, using my granddaughter's love as a weapon to open my wallet. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. The phone rang again. This time it was Brad. "Evelyn, listen to me." His voice was different now. Not angry, but calculated. The tone he probably used in business meetings when he needed to close a deal. "I understand you're upset about something. We all have bad days. But you're hurting the kids with this behavior. The kids. Always the kids. Never me, never my feelings, never my right to be treated with basic respect." "Jake has been asking about you," Brad continued. "He wants to show you his science project. Are you really going to disappoint him because you're having some kind of emotional crisis?" I hung up. Within minutes, my phone was buzzing with text messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Rachel and Brad had recruited reinforcements. "Mrs. Parker, this is Susan Martinez, Emma's gymnastics coach. Rachel asked me to reach out because Emma seems upset about missing class today. Is everything okay?" "Hi, Evelyn. It's Carol from Brad's office. He mentioned you might be going through a difficult time. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here." "Grandma Evelyn? This is Ashley, Rachel's friend. The kids are really worried about you. Maybe you could just send a quick message to let everyone know you're okay?" They were building a narrative around my silence, painting me as unstable, irrational, someone who needed intervention rather than someone who had finally found her voice by choosing not to use it. But the message that broke my heart came at 2 p.m. It was a video text from Rachel's phone, but it wasn't Rachel speaking. It was Emma. "Hi, Grandma," my 10-year-old granddaughter said, her sweet voice made tinny by the phone's speaker. "Mommy said you're sad, and that's why you can't help with my gymnastics. I hope you feel better soon. I love you." I played the video 3 times, each viewing more painful than the last. Emma's innocent face, her genuine concern, her mother's manipulation delivered through the mouth of a child who didn't understand she was being used as ammunition in an adult war. That's when I realized the full scope of what Rachel was willing to do. She would turn my grandchildren against me, make them believe I'd abandoned them, use their confusion and hurt as leverage to force me back into compliance. I was still processing this cruelty when I heard a car door slam in my driveway. Through the window, I saw a police cruiser. Rachel had actually done it. She'd called the police for a wellness check because I hadn't sent money for gymnastics lessons. 2 officers approached my door, a young woman with kind eyes and an older man who looked like he'd seen every type of family drama Columbus had to offer. Their knock was professional but gentle. "Mrs. Parker? We're with Columbus PD. We received a call requesting a wellness check." "Are you all right, ma'am?" I opened the door, composed and dignified in my best dress and my pearl earrings, the ones Thomas had given me for our 20th anniversary. "I'm perfectly fine, officers." "Thank you for your concern." The female officer looked relieved. "Ma'am, your daughter was worried because she hadn't heard from you. She mentioned you'd been acting unusually." "I've been thinking," I said simply. "Sometimes thinking requires silence." The older officer smiled slightly. "Ma'am, are you being pressured to give money to family members?" The question caught me off guard, not because it was inappropriate, but because someone, a stranger, had seen through Rachel's manipulation so quickly. "Officer," I said carefully, "I'm 73 years old. I've been making my own decisions for over 5 decades. If I choose not to answer my phone for one day, that doesn't constitute a mental health crisis." "No, ma'am, it doesn't," the female officer agreed. "We just need to document that you're safe and capable of making your own decisions." "I am both," I assured them. After they left, I sat in my living room and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pride. Pride in myself for remaining calm, for speaking clearly, for not apologizing for taking up space in my own life. But the peace didn't last long. At 4 p.m., a white sedan pulled into my driveway. Rachel and Brad got out, but they weren't alone. Emma and Jake climbed out of the back seat, looking confused and uncomfortable. They were using the children as human shields. I watched through my window as Rachel knelt down to Emma's level, pointing at my house while speaking in animated whispers. Emma's face crumpled, and she started crying. Jake looked angry, his small fists clenched at his sides. Then Rachel took each child by the hand and marched them to my front door. This time, when they knocked, it was Emma's small voice that called out, "Grandma? Why won't you talk to us? Did we do something wrong?" My heart shattered. This was the line Rachel had crossed, making my grandchildren believe they were somehow responsible for an adult conflict they couldn't possibly understand. I opened the door. Emma immediately ran to me, wrapping her arms around my waist. "Grandma, Mommy said you were sick and couldn't talk to anyone." Jake hung back, suspicious. At 8 years old, he was already learning to read adult tensions. "I'm not sick, sweetheart," I said, kneeling to Emma's level. "I'm just thinking about some grown-up things." "Mom," Rachel's voice was cold, controlled. She was recording this interaction on her phone. "The children have been worried sick. Jake had nightmares last night." I looked at my grandson, who avoided my eyes. Jake was a sensitive child, and family conflict affected him deeply. But his nightmares weren't caused by my silence. They were caused by his mother's decision to involve him in adult financial disputes. "Kids," I said gently, "would you like some juice? I have apple juice in the refrigerator." As Emma and Jake went to the kitchen, Rachel and Brad remained in my living room, their postures aggressive and demanding. "This stops now," Brad said, his voice low and threatening. "Whatever game you're playing, it stops. You're hurting everyone, including yourself." "I'm not playing a game," I replied quietly. "I'm just reconsidering some things." "Reconsidering what?" Rachel demanded. "Your responsibilities? Your commitment to your family?" "My worth," I said simply. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Rachel's face flushed red. "Your worth? What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm trying to remember when I became an ATM instead of a person." Brad laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "ATM? Evelyn, you're being dramatic. We're family. Family helps each other." "When did you last help me?" I asked. The question caught them both off guard. They looked at each other, searching for an answer that didn't exist. We appreciate everything you do," Rachel stammered. "That's not what I asked." The silence stretched between us, filled only by the sound of Emma and Jake laughing in the kitchen. the innocent joy of children who didn't yet understand that love could be conditional, that family could be transactional. "You know what?" Brad said finally, his mask of reasonableness slipping entirely. "Maybe you do need to reconsider some things. Like what happens when you're too old to live alone. Like who's going to take care of you when you can't take care of yourself." The threat was subtle but clear. Continue to resist, and they'd abandon me when I needed them most. Rachel nodded, adding her own venom. "And don't think the kids won't notice. They're already asking why Grandma doesn't love them anymore. Using my grandchildren's love as a weapon. Using my fear of abandonment as leverage. Using my own generosity against me." But as I looked at these two people I'd loved and supported for so many years, I realized something profound. I was already abandoned. I'd been abandoned the moment they decided I'd had my time. The only difference was that now I could see it clearly. "I think," I said quietly, "it's time for you to leave." "Mom," Rachel started. "Leave," I repeated, my voice stronger now. "And don't bring the children into this again. Whatever's happening between us, they don't deserve to be used as weapons." As they gathered up Emma and Jake, both children confused and upset by the adult tension they couldn't understand, Rachel turned back to me with one final threat. "You have 24 hours to think about this, Mom. After that, we're done pretending you're capable of making rational decisions." After they left, I sat in my quiet house and realized I'd just witnessed something remarkable. My own family threatening to destroy me for the crime of saying no, but I'd also discovered something else. I was stronger than they'd calculated, and tomorrow I was going to prove it. The 24 hours Rachel had given me stretched before me like a bridge I'd been afraid to cross my entire life. But as I sat in my kitchen that evening, watching the sun set through windows that needed new curtains I'd never bought because I'd been too busy paying for everyone else's wants, I realized something profound. I wasn't afraid anymore. At 7 a.m. the next morning, I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I got dressed for myself, not to impress anyone, not to look appropriate for family visits, but because I wanted to feel beautiful. I chose my navy blue dress with the small pearl buttons, the one Thomas had always said made my eyes look like stormy seas. I put on my pearl earrings, applied lipstick for the first time in months, and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was older than I remembered, more tired, but there was something new in her eyes, something that looked like determination. My first stop was the bank. First National Bank of Columbus sat on High Street like a fortress of financial security, its marble columns and brass fixtures designed to inspire confidence and trust. I'd been banking there for 37 years, but I'd never walked through those doors feeling powerful. Today was different. "Mrs. Parker," Janet Williams, my account manager, greeted me with the professional warmth reserved for customers with substantial accounts. "How wonderful to see you. What can we help you with today?" I sat across from her desk, my purse held carefully in my lap, and spoke words I'd never imagined saying. "I want to remove all authorized users from my accounts." Janet's smile faltered slightly. "I'm sorry? My daughter Rachel has access to my checking account. I want that access terminated immediately." Janet pulled up my account information on her computer screen, and I could see her processing the implications. Rachel had been making transfers from my account for years, thousands of dollars at a time, sometimes multiple times per month. "Mrs. Parker, this is certainly your right," Janet said carefully. "But may I ask, is there a particular reason for this change?" I thought about all the ways I could explain it. The lies, the manipulation, the casual cruelty of being told I'd had my time. Instead, I said simply, "I'm taking control of my own finances." The process took 45 minutes. Paperwork, signatures, verification codes. With each form I signed, I felt lighter, like I was shedding weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of me. "There's one more thing," I said as Janet prepared to close my file. "I'd like to set up account alerts for any attempted access or transaction requests, and I want to change my PIN and security questions." Janet nodded, understanding more than she said. "We can absolutely do that, Mrs. Parker. And might I suggest, if you're concerned about account security, we offer a service where any transfer over a certain amount requires in-person verification." "Yes," I said immediately, "any transfer over $50. As I left the bank, My phone was already buzzing. Rachel had tried to transfer money for something, probably Emma's gymnastics, possibly something else entirely, and had been denied access. I didn't answer the phone. My second stop was somewhere I'd never been before. Margaret Harrison's law office. The building was modest but elegant, housed in a converted Victorian home on 3rd Street. Margaret Harrison herself was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to see straight through polite facades to the truth underneath. "Mrs. Parker," she said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. "I'm so glad you called. Please, sit down. Tell me what's brought you here." I told her everything. The years of financial support, the lies about Emma's dental work, the kitchen renovation funded by my emergency money, the casual dismissal of my worth as a human being. Margaret listened without interruption, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Parker," she said finally, "what you've described is a textbook case of financial exploitation. The question is, what do you want to do about it?" "I want to protect myself," I said. "And I want to make sure that when I die, my money goes to people who actually need it, not people who feel entitled to it." Margaret smiled. "I think we can arrange that." We spent 2 hours going over options. A new will, with specific language preventing challenges. A trust that would distribute my assets to charities after my death. Immediate protection against financial coercion. "There's something else we should discuss," Margaret said as our meeting wound down. "Your daughter is likely to escalate her behavior when she realizes she's lost financial access. People who are accustomed to controlling others through money don't give up easily." She was right. By the time I got home, there were 6 missed calls from Rachel and 13 text messages, each one more frantic than the last. "Mom, something's wrong with your account. The bank says I don't have access anymore. This is ridiculous. I was just trying to pay for Emma's activities. Are you seriously going to let your granddaughter suffer because you're having some kind of breakdown? Mom, call me back. This is important." "Fine. If you want to be selfish, that's your choice. But don't expect us to pretend everything's normal." I made myself a cup of tea. Real tea. The expensive kind I'd been saving for special occasions that never seemed to come, and sat in my living room reading each message. There was no concern for my well-being, no curiosity about why I might have made this decision, just anger that their access to my money had been cut off. The doorbell rang at 3 p.m. Through the peephole, I could see a delivery man holding a large bouquet of flowers. For a moment, my heart lifted. Maybe Rachel was trying to apologize, to rebuild our relationship on something other than financial dependency. I opened the door and accepted the flowers. They were beautiful. White lilies and pink roses, the kind of expensive arrangement that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The card read, "Mom, we love you, and we're worried about you. Please call us so we can work this out. Rachel, Brad, Emma, and Jake." For a moment, I felt the old familiar tug of guilt. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe this was Rachel's way of reaching out, of trying to repair our relationship. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The flowers were charged to my credit card. Rachel had sent me an expensive apology gift and made me pay for it. I called the florist immediately. "Yes, Mrs. Parker," the cheerful voice confirmed. "The order was placed by a Rachel Morrison using the credit card ending in 4782. Is there a problem?" "Cancel any future orders from that person using my card," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't cancel orders that have already been delivered. I'm not asking you to cancel this order. I'm asking you to refuse any future orders from Rachel Morrison using my credit card number." After I hung up, I sat staring at the flowers. They were beautiful, but they represented something ugly. The assumption that I would pay for my own manipulation, that I was so desperate for any gesture of affection that I'd accept even this. I carried the flowers outside and put them in my neighbor Mrs. Henderson's yard with a note. "Thought you might enjoy these. Evelyn." She deserved something beautiful that wasn't tainted by lies. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I cooked dinner for one person, not leftovers that would feed me for a week. Not a sad sandwich eaten standing at the counter, but an actual meal. Chicken breast with herbs, roasted vegetables, a small salad. I set the table with my good china, the set Thomas and I had received as a wedding gift but had rarely used because we were always saving it for company. I was the company. I was worth the good china. As I ate, I thought about the day I'd just experienced, the liberation of closing off access to my money, the empowerment of speaking to a lawyer about my future, the clarity that came from seeing Rachel's true priorities revealed in a bouquet of flowers I'd been forced to buy myself. But the most profound moment had been the simplest. Standing in my kitchen, cooking for myself, realizing that I was allowed to nurture myself with the same care I'd always given others. My phone buzzed with another text from Rachel. "Mom, this silent treatment is childish. We need to talk like adults." For the first time in years, I wrote back, "I am talking like an adult. I'm setting boundaries. If you want to have a conversation that doesn't involve my money, I'm willing to listen." The response came immediately. "So you're choosing money over family?" I stared at that message for a long time, seeing the perfect reversal it represented. Rachel, who had treated me like a bank account for years, was now accusing me of prioritizing money over relationships. I wrote back, "I'm choosing self-respect over being used." Then I turned off my phone and ran a bath. A real bath, with expensive bath salts I'd been saving, candles I'd never lit, and time I'd never allowed myself to take. As I sank into the warm water, I realized something remarkable. For the first time in years, I had nowhere I needed to be, no crisis I needed to solve, no one demanding my immediate attention or financial assistance. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was quiet, but I wasn't empty. I was free. The water grew cold around me as I soaked, but I didn't hurry to get out. I had learned something precious that day. My time belonged to me. My money belonged to me. My peace of mind belonged to me. And tomorrow, I was going to start learning what it felt like to live for myself, instead of for people who had mistaken my generosity for obligation. As I finally got out of the bath and wrapped myself in a warm towel, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed different. Not younger, but somehow more present, more real, more worthy of love that didn't come with a price tag. I walked to my bedroom and, for the first time in months, slept through the night without waking up worried about who might need me, who might be calling, what crisis might be waiting for me in the morning. I slept like someone who had finally come home to herself, and when I woke up the next morning, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Excitement about the day ahead. Not because anything special was planned, but because it was my day, my choices, my life, finally, beautifully, completely mine. 3 days of peace, 3 days of sleeping through the night, of cooking meals I actually wanted to eat, of reading books without interruption, 3 days of remembering what it felt like to exist, without constantly bracing for the next demand. It couldn't last. On Thursday morning, I woke to the sound of multiple car doors slamming in my driveway. Through my bedroom window, I could see them. Rachel and Brad, of course, but they weren't alone. Brad's parents, whom I'd met maybe 5 times in 12 years. Rachel's friend Sarah, who'd never shown any interest in my well-being before. Even Pastor Williams from the church Rachel attended sporadically, the same church that had never once reached out to me after Thomas died. They'd assembled an intervention team. I took my time getting dressed, choosing my clothes carefully. My black wool dress, the one that made me look dignified and uncompromising. Thomas's mother's cameo brooch at my throat. My wedding ring, which I'd kept wearing even though the marriage it represented was now just a memory. I wanted to look like someone who couldn't be intimidated, someone who deserved respect. The knock came at exactly 9 a.m. Coordinated. Planned. I opened the door to find Pastor Williams in front, his kind smile already in place. The others stood behind him like an army of concerned faces, each one radiating the particular kind of pity reserved for elderly people who'd supposedly lost their minds. "Mrs. Parker," Pastor Williams said gently, "I hope you don't mind us stopping by. Rachel and Brad are quite concerned about you." "Are they?" I said, not moving from the doorway. "How thoughtful. May we come in? I think it would be beneficial for everyone to sit down and discuss what's been happening." I looked past him at the assembled group. Brad's mother clutched her purse like a shield, her face pinched with disapproval. His father checked his watch, clearly annoyed at having his morning disrupted. Sarah held her phone at the ready, probably to document whatever breakdown they expected me to have. "I suppose," I said, stepping aside. They filed into my living room, filling the space with nervous energy and barely concealed impatience. Rachel and Brad took the sofa, positioning themselves like prosecution attorneys preparing their case. The others arranged themselves in my chairs, creating a circle with me at the center. An intervention, a literal intervention, as if my decision to stop funding their lifestyle was equivalent to a drug addiction. Pastor Williams cleared his throat. "Mrs. Parker, I want you to know that everyone here loves you and wants what's best for you." "Do they?" I asked, settling into Thomas's old recliner. "How nice." "Rachel has shared some concerns," he continued, "about recent changes in your behavior. Isolation, financial confusion, difficulty making sound decisions. Financial confusion. That's what they were calling it when I stopped letting them steal from me. I'd like to hear about these concerns," I said calmly. "Rachel, please tell me what's confusing about my finances." Rachel's face flushed. She'd expected me to be defensive, apologetic, maybe even tearful. Instead, I was asking her to explain herself in front of witnesses. "Mom, you cut off my access to your account without any explanation. You won't return our calls. You sent the kids home crying because you wouldn't talk to them." "I sent the children home," I corrected, "because you brought them to my door to manipulate me. There's a difference." Brad leaned forward, his voice taking on that reasonable tone I'd learned to distrust. "Evelyn, we're family. Families share resources. When you suddenly cut us off, it affects everyone, especially the kids." "Share resources," I repeated. "Brad, when was the last time you shared any of your resources with me?" The question hung in the air. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. Brad's parents exchanged glances. That's not the point," Brad stammered. "Isn't it? In 5 years, you've taken over $150,000 from me. How much have you given back?" "Given back?" Rachel's voice rose. "Mom, we're not talking about loans. We're talking about family support. Support goes both ways, Rachel. When did you last support me?" Pastor Williams intervened, his voice soothing. "Mrs. Parker, I think there may be some misunderstanding here about family obligations and Christian generosity." I turned to him, this man who'd never once visited me in my loneliness, who'd never called after Thomas's funeral, who'd appeared in my living room only when my money was at stake. "Pastor Williams, are you familiar with the parable of the persistent widow?" He blinked, caught off guard. Yes, of course. She kept asking the judge for justice, didn't she? And eventually, she received it. Yes, but I'm not sure how that applies. I'm the widow, Pastor, and I'm asking for justice." Sarah spoke up for the first time, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Mrs. Parker, nobody's trying to hurt you, but cutting off your family financially, it seems so unlike you, so angry." "You're right," I said. "It is unlike me. The old me would have apologized by now. The old me would have written a check to make everyone happy. The old me would have convinced herself that being used was the same as being loved." "Mom," Rachel stood up, her composure finally cracking. "We do love you, but love isn't just about money." "Then prove it," I said simply. "What?" "Prove that you love me for something other than my bank account. Have a relationship with me that doesn't involve asking for money." The silence that followed was deafening. They looked at each other, searching for words that didn't exist because none of them could imagine loving me without my financial utility. Brad's mother finally spoke, her voice sharp with irritation. "Mrs. Parker, this is ridiculous. Rachel and Brad have 2 children to think about. They have responsibilities." "So do I," I replied. "I have a responsibility to myself." "You're being selfish," she continued. "At your age, what do you need money for? You should be thinking about your legacy, about what you're leaving behind." "I am thinking about my legacy. I'm thinking about leaving behind a world where elderly people aren't seen as walking ATMs for their ungrateful families." Pastor Williams tried again. "Mrs. Parker, perhaps we could find a compromise. Some kind of arrangement that meets everyone's needs." "I tried that for 5 years," I said. "The arrangement was that I gave everything and got nothing in return. I'm not interested in compromising anymore." Rachel was crying now, but they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of rage. "You're destroying our family! Emma asks about you every day. Jake thinks you don't love him anymore." "Then tell them the truth," I said, my voice steady despite the pain her words caused. "Tell them that Grandma loves them very much, but she's not going to pay for their activities anymore. Tell them that love and money are two different things. We can't afford—" Brad started. "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you bought a Tesla and a hot tub with my money." The room erupted. Everyone started talking at once. Accusations, pleas, threats, guilt trips. Through it all, I sat quietly in Thomas's chair, watching the people I'd supported for years reveal their true selves. Finally, I stood up. "This meeting is over," I announced. "Mrs. Parker," Pastor Williams said, "I really think we should continue this discussion." "No," I said firmly. "I've heard enough. You've all made your positions clear. My money is more important to you than my dignity. My utility is more valuable than my humanity. Well, I'm done being useful." I walked to the front door and opened it. "Please leave." One by one they filed out, their faces ranging from confused to angry to disappointed. Sarah muttered something about stubborn old people under her breath. Brad's parents shook their heads in disgust. Pastor Williams pressed his business card into my hand with a murmured, "Call me if you reconsider." Rachel was the last to leave. She stopped in the doorway, her face streaked with tears. "Mom, please, don't do this. Don't throw away our family over money." "I'm not throwing anything away," I said quietly. "I'm simply refusing to buy something that should be freely given." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that if the only way I can have a relationship with you is by paying for it, then I don't actually have a relationship with you at all." She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker across her face. A moment of recognition, maybe even shame, but it passed quickly, replaced by familiar anger. "Fine," she said, "but don't expect us to come crawling back when you change your mind, and don't expect the kids to understand why their grandmother abandoned them." "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said. "I'm just setting boundaries." After they left, I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. The confrontation had been exhausting, but something else too, liberating. For the first time in years, I'd spoken my truth without apologizing for it. I walked to the living room and began straightening the chairs they'd displaced. As I worked, I thought about what Rachel had said about the children. Emma asking about me, Jake thinking I didn't love him. The thought broke my heart, but I couldn't let it break my resolve, because I did love them. I loved them enough to refuse to model a relationship based on financial exploitation. I loved them enough to hope that someday they'd understand the difference between love and transaction. I loved them enough to risk their temporary confusion for the chance of their eventual understanding. That evening, I did something I'd been planning for days. I went to my desk and pulled out a piece of my good stationery, the cream-colored paper with my monogram that I'd been saving for special occasions. I wrote 2 letters, one to Emma, one to Jake. Letters explaining that I loved them, that my recent absence had nothing to do with them, that grown-ups sometimes had to make difficult decisions to protect themselves and the people they cared about. I sealed the letters in envelopes and addressed them to the children, care of their school. I wanted them to have my words without their parents' interpretation. Then I wrote a 3rd letter, this one to Margaret Harrison, authorizing her to proceed with the new will we'd discussed. The one that would ensure my money went to people who needed it rather than people who felt entitled to it. As I sealed that final envelope, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not the exhausted peace of surrender, but the energizing peace of someone who'd finally stopped fighting the wrong battle. I was no longer fighting for their love. I was fighting for my own dignity. And for the first time in this whole ordeal, I was winning. 6 weeks had passed since the intervention, and I was learning what it meant to breathe again. The silence from Rachel's family was complete now. No more demanding phone calls. No more guilt-laden text messages. No more surprise visits with hidden agendas. At first, the quiet had felt strange, almost uncomfortable. For years, the chaos of their constant needs had become the soundtrack of my life. Without it, I had to learn how to listen to my own thoughts again. And what I discovered in that silence was remarkable. I had thoughts, desires, dreams that had nothing to do with anyone else's needs or wants. It started small. On a Tuesday morning in early November, I woke up and realized I didn't have to check my phone immediately. No one was expecting money from me. No one needed me to solve their crisis. I could lie in bed for as long as I wanted, watching the autumn light filter through my bedroom curtains, thinking about absolutely nothing urgent. So I did. I stayed in bed until 9 a.m., something I hadn't done since Thomas died. When I finally got up, it was because I wanted to, not because someone else needed me to. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in 20 years. I went shopping for myself, not the grim, efficient grocery shopping of someone stretching every dollar, but the leisurely, indulgent shopping of someone who could afford to choose what she actually wanted. I drove to Easton Town Center, the upscale shopping district I'd always considered too expensive for someone like me. But as I walked through the bright corridors filled with beautiful things, I realized something profound. I wasn't someone like me anymore. I was someone who had money because I'd stopped giving it all away to people who didn't appreciate it. My first purchase was a cashmere sweater in deep burgundy, the color of wine in candlelight. It cost more than I'd typically spend on clothes in 3 months, but when I put it on in the dressing room, I looked like someone who mattered, someone worth the expense of luxury. The saleswoman, a young girl with kind eyes, smiled as she rang up my purchase. "That color is perfect on you," she said. "You look radiant." Radiant. When was the last time anyone had described me that way? Over the following weeks, I began to discover who I was when I wasn't defined by other people's needs. I bought books I'd always wanted to read but never had time for because I was too busy managing everyone else's emergencies. I joined a Tai Chi class at the community center, moving my 73-year-old body with gentle intention for the first time in years. I even started cooking again, really cooking, not just heating up whatever was quick and cheap. I bought good ingredients, tried new recipes, set my table with the china Thomas and I had saved for company that never came. I was the company now, and I deserved the good dishes. But the most significant change came when I met Dorothy. I was at the farmer's market on a Saturday morning, selecting tomatoes with the careful attention of someone who finally had time to choose quality over convenience, when I heard a voice behind me. "Those heirlooms are beautiful, aren't they? But they bruise so easily." I turned to see a woman about my age, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, her eyes bright with intelligence and humor. She was examining the same tomatoes I'd been considering, but with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for. "They are beautiful," I agreed, "but I'm not sure I know how to choose the good ones." "The secret," she said, leaning closer conspiratorially, "is to trust your nose more than your eyes. The best ones smell like summer dirt and sunshine." We spent the next hour walking through the market together, Dorothy teaching me the subtle art of selecting produce, telling me stories about the vendors she'd come to know over the years. She moved through the world with an ease I envied, comfortable in her own skin, unafraid to take up space. "I'm Dorothy Chen," she said as we reached the end of our market tour, her arms full of vegetables and mine full of inspiration. "Evelyn Parker," I replied. "Evelyn, would you like to have coffee? There's a lovely cafe just across the street, and I get the feeling you might have some interesting stories to tell." That coffee turned into 3 hours of conversation that flowed like water finding its level. Dorothy was 75, a retired teacher who'd never married but had lived a life full of purpose and joy. She traveled. She volunteered. She had friends scattered across the globe and adventures that made my sheltered existence seem pale by comparison. But she didn't make me feel small. Instead, she made me feel possible. "You know what I've learned in my 75 years?" she said, as we sat in the warm cafe, autumn sunlight streaming through the windows. "The most radical thing a woman can do is live for herself, not selfishly, but intentionally. Most of us spend so much time being what other people need that we forget who we actually are." "I'm just starting to remember," I admitted. "Then you're exactly where you need to be." Dorothy became my first real friend in decades. Not someone who needed something from me, not someone connected to my family drama, just someone who enjoyed my company for no reason other than the fact that she found me interesting. Through Dorothy, I met others. Margaret, a widow who'd started painting at 68, and now sold her watercolors at local galleries. Susan, who'd left her controlling adult children in California and moved to Ohio to start fresh. Linda, who'd divorced her husband of 40 years and discovered she was happier alone than she'd ever been married. We called ourselves the Late Bloomers, a group of women who'd found themselves after decades of being what everyone else needed them to be. We met for coffee, took day trips to places we'd always wanted to see, shared books and recipes and stories of the lives we were finally brave enough to live. For the first time since Thomas died, I had a social life that didn't revolve around solving other people's problems. But the most profound change happened on a cold December evening when I was sitting in my living room reading a novel Dorothy had recommended, when I realized I was happy. Not content, not resigned, not making the best of things. Actually, genuinely happy. The realization was so startling that I set down my book and looked around my living room as if seeing it for the first time. The furniture I'd always thought was too modest, too old, too worn. It looked cozy now, lived in, comfortable. The photographs on my mantel showed a life well lived. My wedding day, Thomas at his job, family gatherings from when Rachel was small and still looked at me with genuine affection. I wasn't erasing my past. I was finally able to see it clearly, without the distortion of ongoing pain. That night, I did something I'd been thinking about for weeks. I opened the small pewter box where I kept Thomas's wedding ring and the key to our safety deposit box. It was time to read the letter he'd written me before he died. At the bank the next morning, I sat in the private room they provided for safety deposit box access and opened the sealed envelope Thomas had left for me. His handwriting, so familiar it made my chest ache, covered 2 pages of his careful script. "My dearest Evie," it began, "if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you're struggling with something that requires more courage than you think you have. I know you, my love. I know how you give and give until there's nothing left of yourself. I know how you mistake being needed for being loved. By now, Rachel has probably revealed who she really is. I saw it starting years ago. The way she looked at you like a resource instead of a person. The way she calculated what she could get from you instead of what she could give to you. I wanted to say something, but I knew you had to see it yourself. I knew you had to choose your own worth over her demands. If you're reading this, it means you've chosen yourself. I'm so proud of you, Evie. So proud and so relieved that you finally understand what I've always known. You are valuable beyond measure, not for what you can provide, but for who you are. The money we saved, it's yours to do with as you see fit. Don't let anyone guilt you into believing you owe it to people who never appreciated the gift of your love. You've earned the right to be selfish now. You've earned the right to think of yourself first. Live, Evie. Really live. Travel to Ireland like we planned. Buy yourself flowers. Eat cake for breakfast if you want to. Spend our money on things that make you happy, not things that make other people tolerate you. You are enough, my darling. You have always been enough. All my love, always and forever. Thomas. I sat in that sterile bank room and cried, not from sadness, but from relief. Thomas had seen what I'd been too afraid to acknowledge. He'd known I would need permission to value myself, and he'd given it to me in the most generous way possible. That evening, I did something I'd been dreaming about since the day I'd first stood up to Rachel. I booked a trip to Ireland. 2 weeks in County Cork, where Thomas's grandmother had been born, staying in bed and breakfasts, and taking my time to explore the countryside we'd always planned to see together. As I entered my credit card information on the travel website, I felt a flutter of anxiety. This trip would cost nearly $3,000. Money that 6 months ago would have gone to Rachel for some manufactured crisis. But then I thought about Thomas's letter, about Dorothy's friendship, about the woman I was becoming. I clicked Confirm Purchase and felt a thrill of anticipation I hadn't experienced in years. I was going to Ireland, not because anyone needed me to, not because it solved anyone else's problems, but because I wanted to go and I could afford to make it happen. For the first time in my adult life, that was reason enough. As I prepared for bed that night, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was still 73, still marked by loss and hardship, but there was something new in her face, a lightness, a sense of possibility. She looked like someone who was just beginning to discover what it meant to be fully alive. Tomorrow, I would start planning for Ireland. I would call Dorothy and tell her about my adventure. I would continue the beautiful, difficult work of learning to put myself first. Tonight, I would sleep peacefully, knowing that I was finally living the life Thomas and I had worked so hard to make possible. And for the first time in years, that felt like more than enough. It felt like everything. 8 months later, I stood on the cliffs of Dingle Peninsula in County Cork, Ireland, watching the Atlantic Ocean crash against the rocks below. The wind whipped through my hair, longer now, softer, silver white like sea foam. I'd stopped coloring it the week before my trip, deciding that if I was going to embrace my age, I might as well embrace all of it. The bed and breakfast owner, a woman named Siobhan with laugh lines around her eyes and flour permanently under her fingernails, had packed me a lunch of brown bread and local cheese. I sat on the ancient stone wall that separated the cliff from the pasture and ate slowly, savoring both the food and the moment. "Thomas," I said aloud to the wind, "we made it to Ireland." A year ago, talking to my dead husband on a clifftop in Ireland would have seemed impossible. Not just the travel, though at 73, I'd never imagined myself confident enough to navigate foreign airports and rental cars alone, but the peace, the contentment, the bone-deep certainty that I was exactly where I belonged. My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. For a moment, my old anxiety flickered. Was someone having an emergency? But then I remembered. I'd given Dorothy's number as my emergency contact, not Rachel's. The only people who had this number were people who cared about me, not people who needed things from me. It was a text from Margaret, the artist from our late bloomers group. "Evelyn, my painting of the covered bridge sold today. The gallery wants 3 more. Living your dreams really is contagious. Thank you for showing us how it's done." I smiled, typing back. "Congratulations. Can't wait to celebrate when I get home." Home. When had Columbus started feeling like home again, instead of just a place where I existed between crises? The trip to Ireland had been everything I'd dreamed and more. Not because it was perfect. I'd gotten lost twice, burned my tongue on tea that was hotter than I expected, and spent one entire afternoon crying in a church cemetery where I'd hoped to find Thomas's great-grandmother's grave but couldn't read the weathered headstones. But those imperfections had been mine. My mistakes, my disappointments, my small adventures. For the first time in decades, I was living a life that belonged entirely to me. I'd been back from Ireland for 3 months now, and the changes kept revealing themselves in small ways. I'd redecorated my living room with colors I actually liked. Warm yellows and deep blues instead of the beige neutrals I'd chosen because they were practical. I'd started wearing perfume again, the expensive bottle Thomas had given me for our last anniversary together that I'd been saving for special occasions. Every day was a special occasion now, but perhaps the most significant change was the letter that had arrived 2 weeks after I returned from Ireland. The return address made my heart skip. Emma Parker Morrison, care of Riverside Elementary School. My granddaughter had written to me. The letter was in the careful cursive of a 10-year-old trying to make her best impression. "Dear Grandma Evelyn, I got your letter that you sent to my school. Mom was mad that you sent it there, but I was happy. I miss you a lot. I don't understand why grown-ups fight about money, but I know you love me and Jake even when we can't see you. I started saving my allowance like you said in your letter. I have $27 now. Mom says I should spend it, but I like having it saved. It makes me feel strong like you said it would. I hope you are happy. I hope someday we can have a tea party again like we used to. Love, Emma P.S. Jake misses you too, but he's too mad to say so." I'd carried that letter with me to Ireland, reading it on the plane and in quiet moments when the beauty of the countryside overwhelmed me. Emma was learning what I'd taken 73 years to understand, that having your own resources, your own power, made you feel strong in ways that went beyond money. The afternoon I returned from the cliffs, I found Siobhan in her kitchen, kneading dough for tomorrow's breakfast bread. She looked up as I entered, her hands still floury. "How were the cliffs today, love?" "Perfect," I said. "Exactly what I needed. You have the look of someone who's found what she was searching for." I considered that. I think I was searching for myself. It just took me a very long time to realize that's what was missing. Siobhan nodded knowingly. "Ah, That's the hardest journey of all. But you made it, didn't you? That evening, I sat in the small garden behind the bed and breakfast, writing in the journal I'd started keeping, not to track expenses or manage other people's crises, but to record my own thoughts, my own experiences, my own gradual awakening to the possibility of joy. Day 247 of my new life, I wrote. Today I realized that happiness isn't something that happens to you. It's something you choose, sometimes moment by moment, sometimes despite everything that suggests you shouldn't. When I returned to Columbus, Dorothy met me at the airport with a welcome home sign and tears in her eyes. "Look at you," she said, hugging me tight. "You're glowing." And I was. Not just from the Irish sun, but from something deeper, from the radical act of living for myself. Over dinner that night, I told her about my decision, the one I'd been mulling over throughout my trip, the one that felt both terrifying and absolutely right. "I'm moving," I said. Dorothy's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Moving where?" "I don't know yet. Maybe somewhere warmer. Maybe somewhere with mountains. Maybe somewhere where nobody knows me as the woman who used to pay for everyone else's problems." "What about your house? Your memories with Thomas?" I'd thought about this a lot. "The memories aren't in the house, Dorothy. They're in here." I touched my chest. "And Thomas would want me to go wherever makes me happiest." 6 weeks later, I put my house on the market, the same house where I'd been so unhappy, so trapped by obligation and manipulation, sold in 3 days to a young couple expecting their first child. As I signed the papers, I felt nothing but gratitude for the life I'd lived there and for the courage to leave it behind. I bought a small cottage in Asheville, North Carolina, nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains with a view that changed with every season. The late bloomers threw me a going-away party that turned into a celebration of transformation, not just mine, but all of ours. We'd all learned that it was never too late to choose yourself. The last box I packed was the shoebox from my dresser drawer. All those receipts, all that evidence of financial exploitation. I'd kept them as proof, but I didn't need proof anymore. I knew what had happened. More importantly, I knew it would never happen again. I threw the entire box in the fireplace and watched it burn, each receipt curling into ash, each bank statement disappearing into smoke. The flames were warm on my face, cleansing. As the fire died down, I pulled out one final item, the business card Margaret Harrison had given me. But instead of her information, I saw the note I'd written on the back months ago. "When you're ready to make some changes." I was more than ready. I was reborn. On my last morning in Columbus, I drove to the cemetery where Thomas was buried. I'd brought him a single red rose and a photograph from Ireland. Me standing on those cliffs, arms spread wide, face turned toward the sun. I kept my promise, I told his headstone. I chose myself. And Thomas, I'm happy. Really, truly happy. The wind rustled through the oak trees above his grave, and for a moment, I could swear I heard his voice. "I always knew you would, Evie. I just had to wait for you to know it too." 3 years have passed since I moved to Asheville. 3 years of mornings when I wake up excited about the day ahead. 3 years of friendships based on mutual joy rather than mutual need. 3 years of spending my money on things that bring me pleasure. Art classes, travel, donations to organizations that help elderly women escape financial abuse. I never heard from Rachel again after the intervention. My lawyer tells me she hired an attorney to contest the will, but there was nothing to contest. The money was mine, earned through decades of work and sacrifice, and I had every right to decide how it would be distributed after my death. Emma writes to me sometimes. Her letters arrive at my lawyer's office, the only address I've given her, and they fill my heart with hope. She's 14 now, developing her own opinions about money and family and what it means to be strong. She started a small business selling friendship bracelets, saving half of what she earns. "I think I understand now, Grandma," she wrote in her last letter, "why you had to go away. Mom still talks about you like you were mean, but I think you were just tired of being sad." Last week, I did something I'd been planning for months. I wrote my will, my final will, the one that would stand no matter what legal challenges might come. Most of my estate will go to organizations that support elderly women, help them recognize financial abuse, and provide resources for starting over at any age. But I left something special for Emma. Not money. She doesn't need that yet, and I want her to earn her own financial independence. Instead, I left her Thomas's pocket watch, the one he'd given me on our anniversary, the one that still keeps perfect time. Along with the watch, I'm leaving her this letter. My dear Emma, by the time you read this, I'll be gone, but I hope the woman you've become will understand why I made the choices I did. The watch I'm leaving you belonged to your great-grandfather Thomas, a man who understood that time is our most precious resource, more precious than money, more valuable than approval, more important than keeping the peace. Time is the one thing you can never get back once you've given it away. Spend it wisely. Spend it on people who value you for who you are, not what you can provide. Spend it on experiences that feed your soul, not obligations that drain it. Most importantly, never let anyone convince you that loving yourself is selfish. The most generous thing you can do for the world is to become the fullest, truest version of yourself. Your great-grandfather's watch will remind you that your time belongs to you. Use it well. All my love, your Grandma Evelyn. As I finish writing this story, the sun is setting over the Blue Ridge Mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. In a few minutes, I'll call Dorothy. She moved to Asheville 6 months after I did, and we'll make plans for tomorrow. Maybe we'll drive to the farmer's market. Maybe we'll take a painting class. Maybe we'll do absolutely nothing but sit on my porch and talk about books. It doesn't matter what we do, because for the first time in my life, my time is truly my own. And that, I've learned, is the most valuable inheritance of all. So I'll ask you this. Have you ever found yourself paying for love that should have been freely given? Have you ever felt like your worth was measured by your wallet rather than your heart? If any of this sounds familiar, please comment below and share your story. And if this message resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. Someone else needs to hear that it's never too late to choose yourself, and you might be the person who helps this message reach them. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply decide that you matter too.